Hello there, I'm Ryan, and welcome to my channel, Analyze This Mr. Bond, where I discuss the adventures of James Bond 007 and dig for what lies beneath the surface. And today, I've come to you to admit that I was wrong. In my video about predictions for 2024, I boldly claimed that by the end of April, we would officially know who would be the director for Bond 26. I was wrong. We do not know who the director of Bond 26 will be. In fact, we don't really know much about the status of Bond 26 much at all. It just seems like it's stuck in limbo. And with that sort of weird limbo state kind of infecting all of the Bond community and Bond discourse, it's kind of deflating a little bit. My prediction was anchored in a sense that the industry and the film industry is broadly motivated by financial incentives. Amazon has invested a great deal of money in its acquisition of MGM. The Bond series has largely not moved much since No Time to Die was released, right? So the clock's ticking on a new blockbuster film. Surely Amazon is seeking to recoup some of that money. And I assumed there would be pressure that would really jumpstart the development of a new Bond film this year. And my assumption, too, was that it really would begin development with the announcement of a director, not, as it has been in some of the cases in the past, a set of writers, because I think we've really seen Eon Productions shift in their model here, where they really like a director to be shepherding the vision for a new Bond film. Certainly that was how things were working as soon as they got into the mix on Skyfall, which had two different takes on it. The earlier version, which was not made, called Once Upon a Spy, with the, I believe, Peter Morgan writing that screenplay. That didn't move forward. Sam Mendes came on board, and that became Skyfall. And subsequently, you saw, obviously, the big focus on Boyle, laying out his vision for what would become No Time to Die, him stepping aside, and coming in Cary Fukunaga. They are a director-focused company now at this point. They really like the creative perspective of a director. I think even if they produce kind of like a loose story framework, a set of story elements that they have pulled together with Purvis and Wade in the form of treatments or rough drafts, it is very much the case that they are drawn to directors to make this real. And this is especially important with Bond 26, where Bond 26 really needs a new vision for the character. So my assumption has always been that we are really going to hear about Bond 26 taking off when we get a director announcement. I don't expect them to come to the table and say, hey, we're working on a script. In many ways, I think it feels like they're going to shop around with directors first, feel what their takes are, and then kind of start to work on the story from there. Perhaps in collaboration with some of their established team, like Purvis and Wade, kind of helping assist there as kind of Bond series experts, which is generally the role they've filled in past films across the Craig era and Brosnan tenure at the very end there. So I just assumed that things had left long enough and that the ball would just have to be rolling in this year. I assumed that a lot of the slow start was due to, we had a lot of strikes. That has actually taken a big toll on the film industry in general. You kind of look ahead to the blockbuster film slate for 2025, and it's pretty slim pickings. Even this year, it's not what we saw in prior years. Like the the kind of deferment of COVID resulted in a lot of things getting delayed, and then the strikes did too. So a lot of studios are under pressure to really get things out there. I assumed that pressure was going to roll downhill a little bit, and Eon Productions was going to feel that they really had to get things moving in order to keep Bond 26 from creeping past the, winter 2026 deadline. Maybe not. I mean, maybe what they've been telling us all this time, that it's going to be a while, they were giving interviews that kind of gave the impression that they're not really going to start thinking about Bond until the end of this year, and that is beginning to feel more and more accurate. Now, there is a hypothetical case here that we got a lot of rumors over, the tail end of 2023 into the start of this year, really, that Eon Productions and Christopher Nolan were in talks. Whether you believe there was any legitimacy to that or not, it does seem that I think it's reasonable to suspect that conversations happened. I don't know to what extent the rumors that, there were talks of, there were rumors about Christopher Nolan doing 2 films back to back, and them disagreeing over Christopher Nolan wanting to do a period piece or not, and things like that. Whether you believe any of those details, which I don't put much stock in the specificity of those rumors, they've been photographed together. Bond has been discussed, and it's pretty clear based on the recent turn of news that Christopher Nolan is kind of going his own way with his own project, likely to be an adaptation of the spy television series The Prisoner, which is near and dear to my heart. I'm really kind of excited to see that project take flight, if that is indeed what Christopher Nolan is doing. So it is possible that time just kind of got wasted with them courting Christopher Nolan for a bit, and now they're looking for somebody else to kind of fill that space. It is kind of hard to imagine Bond 26 starting, again, as I said, without a director in place. Christopher Nolan was an obvious candidate because, he's at the top of the world right now. He's always wanted to do Bond. He's always said he specifically wants to reinvent Bond. So this is kind of like a now or never opportunity for him. Otherwise, he's going to have to wait another, 15 or so years to do it when the Bond novels start to really enter the public domain in an international way. And maybe he could start up his own kind of Bond riff at that time. That's going to be a really interesting time. That's the other reason there's kind of a ticking clock here for Eon Productions, because as much as they can legally defend their own trademarks for the Bond series, the Bond novels have already started to creep into the public domain. And when the Bond copyright effectively expires, that kind of means he becomes like Sherlock Holmes, and you can get a lot of different versions of the character. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what that happens. When that happens, how Eon Productions responds. I would have assumed that Eon Productions was really going to be intentional about making sure that they were getting, another decade's worth of movies in before that happened, to really establish the Eon Productions James Bond as the cinematic James Bond. Of course, they have a large corpus of film history behind them to back that up. But I know, we're going to see. And a lot of the other directors that have been in the talks for Bond now have slates pretty full. Denis Villeneuve, who just did Dune, seems to have a pretty full future slate. We got news that Cary Fukunaga's picked up a new project. Edgar Wright is just announced that he's doing the remake of Barbarella. There's just all these people who have been in conversation to do a Bond film in the past or have connections with the series seem to be committed. I obviously fan favorite, Martin Campbell. It would be great to have him back, but it just seems like a long shot at this point. It's just really curious who would even be in the director's chair to do Bond at this point in time. So I don't know. It's kind of a weird moment to be a Bond fan. I kind of believed that Bond would just happen by virtue of market forces pressuring Bond to exist, right? There's just a lot of money being left on the table, and I don't think the Road to a Million reality show, which is still getting its season 2, is kind of like the focal point for a big return on investment there. And in many ways, I'm still surprised it is receiving a season 2, given that season 1 didn't seem to be kind of like a real flash in the pan, as far as even just like the algorithm goes. So I don't know, folks. It's a weird time to be a Bond fan. It really does feel like we're kind of in the great unknown, and maybe we will still get some announcement coming up in the near future. But certainly, I missed the mark with my suggestion that we would have known by now. I really did think we would know by now. I really did think that there was going to be some real momentum on it, but we're not even getting anything in the way of like gossip and chatter that we usually get when the director hunt is on. There's usually industry smoke, because even outside of Eon Productions, usually other stakeholders are involved making plans around it, right? That's going to affect how Amazon is doing planning, and all the executives there are going to be aware of how that fits into their roadmap and different things like that. It's usually the case that the industry starts to get a big sense for what's happening with a major project like this that is going to cost an enormous sum of money and be a kind of large cultural event with all the planning around it. So I guess, folks, we might not be looking at a Bond movie until, 2027, which is quite a long time to wait. At least we do have the Project 007 video game coming up, and I'm still optimistic that we're going to get really good news about that this year. And I don't know, folks. I'm not disappointed. I do want to clarify about Bond in general. In some ways, it's nice to have at least a few years of reprieve to just kind of focus on Bond as a character as he's been established. I am very zen about the idea of, taking a break from new Bond movies and just kind of reflecting on what's there, enjoying the new Bond comics that have been coming out, which have been, a very great source of pleasure for me and things like that, and looking forward to a new Bond video game. There seems to be Bond stuff going on in addition to all the cool Bond fan events and museum displays and things. All that, there's a lot of Bond stuff going on that has kind of kept this community alive, but it is getting to the point where it's a little discouraging to know that, it might not be till next spring that we are seriously hearing about the development of the next Bond movie. So let me know your thoughts. Always happy to hear from y'all in the comments. But, here I am. I was wrong. And having said that, I'll catch you in the next one.